Hello everyone, welcome to another one of our how-to videos in the Foil Guys channel. And today we were given a bit of a technical request, not only in technology, but requiring multiple steps and making sure that we think this through as straightforwardly and consistently as possible. We have the request to do Optimus Prime from Transformers. For the sake of simplicity, we're going to be doing the Generation 1 version of Transformers. And so if you'd like to follow me through step by step, we'll not only be discussing how to do this step by step, but also be able to form Optimus Prime in such a way where he can actually transform. So if you follow along with me, obviously Optimus Prime, if you've seen any of the videos we've done on him without audio commentary, it's required a bit of steps. But fortunately, if you're able to do a solid block, if you're able to smooth out surfaces on edges, and also at the same time do cylinders, then that's all that's really going to be needed. And also likewise, as we've done in a majority of our videos, we've walked through the 3 steps that will be needed to be able to accomplish really anything in foil sculpting, so long as you practice with them. That is, of course, molding 3D shapes, pinching to form in details, and attaching new pieces by attaching them through molding and pinching, applying the first 2 techniques. Well, that's all that we're going to be doing today. So taking this step by step, we'll first and foremost start with the legs, then the arms, the body, and head. Then we will attach them, and I'll show you how to make sure they are attached in such a way that they can be used to transform him later on. So keeping in mind first the legs, we'll stretch out some foil for his legs, and obviously it's going to be fairly consistent. We'll pinch off, we'll roll in a piece, and notice that's all I did. I stopped at a certain point, but I gripped in a piece that will attach his torso to in a moment. But the majority of the work here today will be at the legs, so I'm going to split this down the middle, and those will form both of our legs. And this is all that I'm doing. I'm tearing at an edge, and we'll leave this section for his lower body. Now, the upper legs are fairly simple. We just need squares. So what I want you all to do with me is keeping these 3 primary fingers, your pointer finger, your middle finger, and your thumb, in a grip with both fingers, both hands as well. Just mold and pinch until you have this form of shape. Mold and pinch. Keep in mind that you want to start and stop exactly where you think a square would begin. It'll work that same way. Mold it into a 3D shape, and then use either these 2 fingers or your thumbs to form those 90-degree angles that will form his rectangular upper legs. Now then, moving on, and forgive me for doing this all from memory in case minor details are missed, but the other part of Optimus Prime's features in Generation 1 were just slightly larger rectangles with wheels on the sides. So we'll keep that in mind by tearing off 2 sections where we'll attach wheels, and then do the same thing we did for the upper leg, but in a different way. Now note, I'm doing my best to put a distance between the upper leg that we've already finished and the lower leg by rolling this over and pinching it at the same 90-degree angle. We have the space for his wheels later on, but all we want to do is make the lower legs. And we can, of course, wrap this around again and again to make it a little bit thicker. Also, for his feet, same deal. They'll just be a small triangle. So we'll roll this up and over, start pinching the edges until they come to a flat surface, and the rest is just pushing it into place. And now we have a foot. Now if you guys need further instructions, we'll do this again with the other leg, but for the sake of time, I'll also do some reinforcement onto the upper, or rather the lower part of his leg, and make sure that this looks the way that I want it to. Now note, I'm wrapping carefully in between the spaces that I've reserved for both of his wheels that we'll attach to later on. But just with simple pinching and twisting, note I'm only using these 3 fingers, I'll make those straight lines on the edges of his legs, and now we have more of a solid shape. Now for the other leg, we just do the same thing. We'll tear off 2 specific pieces for the wheels, that will be set right here. But of course not tearing any further or farther than this. We want a lot of foil to use for these areas. But using the thumb and the 2 pointer fingers as barriers to tell me where and when to mold and when to stop, I'll mold this into a 3D shape, pinch this end, and make sure that it folds up into the right place. Since I want it to be thicker, I'll wrap this around, but do so in a way that it doesn't interfere. It goes between where I've set aside space for his leg wheels. So that will be Optimus Prime's legs as a whole. The upper body, of course, the lower body rather. I'm going to use my middle finger behind the foil, use my pointer and thumbs to mold it over and fold it. Now note my pointer fingers are now behind the foil. Fold it back. And now I have more of a box-like shape, and then the rest is just pinching in details that will allow me to work around this. Now that's a little bit more protruding. Let's just use our pointer finger to press that in. And the rest is just readjusting the upper legs and pinching in and flattening out details where we think they ought to be more flat or more shapely. The legs also require wheels. Unfortunately, this is going to be straightforward, but for the sake of accommodations for beginners, we will use extra pieces for this. So tear off a good size section of foil that you can then also tear into 4 equally sized pieces. And these, of course, will be our wheels. I want you to fold these wheels long ways in half for all 4 of these pieces that are going to be used for wheels, because we want these to have some depth to them. These aren't just cylinders, these are actually wheels. And then holding them not flat, but long ways. Wrap them around each of the sections that you've set aside, and you'll see that as you're wrapping them, it will line out for you and look exactly like a wheel. You can use your finger to press it down in certain areas, but the rest is just pinching it in and making it look like a wheel. And for this part that's sticking out, just use your 2 fingers to brace the wheel and press it in with your thumb. There, now we have a wheel. And we'll do the same thing for each end. Long ways, wrap it around the section, tie it and press it in where appropriate to make sure that it sticks, pinch in on the sides, smooth out with your thumbs where appropriate, but leave it alone ultimately. Press it into place, and now we have Optimus Prime's left leg. We'll do the same for his right. You guys can all follow along with this on your own, just wrapping it around, pressing it in where appropriate, pinching in to meet the shape, and pushing in with your thumb if anything is sticking out from the sides. Same thing on the last end, and you will have Optimus Prime with his wheels. So with that said, we now have his lower body. Let's move on to the upper body, which will be a separate piece. Of course, the upper body's most prominent feature won't just be the grille of the truck or the pectorals that are based off the windshield, but also the arms that have smokestacks on them. So let's do those first. Tearing off a substantial piece. Note, they will be smaller, but we want to make sure they support a lot of weight, and we also want a lot of extra space so that we can tie these on afterwards. So take about a sheet of foil as long as the leg, tear it off the roll, and then tear it also down the middle. This will give you plenty to work with. As you can see, it wasn't a straight line, so I'll just section off these pieces, the more skinnier pieces, to be used to attach it to the torso later on. But this is about the same amount of space that you want to work with, given the amount of details that he'll have in his shoulders and in his hands. Now, because hands are a little bit more complicated, you aren't required to do them. This is a beginner's course, so don't worry, you won't be graded on your performances, but the goal is to get into practice, to learn these techniques and be consistent with them. So starting with the smokestacks that'll be protruding from his shoulders, let's tear off a long piece. Notice I didn't tear all the way, just a short section, and upward like that. And rolling it just like you would a piece of Play-Doh, I'm going to roll those smokestacks, but I'm going to do so gently so that I don't end up tearing off the whole piece. And if you do, don't worry about it. I'll show you how to reattach pieces in a moment. Using, of course, your thumb to brace and press in, just like we did with the tires, you can roll it just like you would any other material until you have that cylindrical shape. And then, of course, you can just bend this down and make it face the direction that you want it to. This, of course, being his shoulder. All of those of you can see that, this is the smokestack. The shoulders then, of course, will form the same type of posture and molding techniques that we used for the legs. So, sparing you guys the time, I'll fold this over and mold it into a more blobby shape, and then use my pointer finger and thumbs, perhaps my middle finger as well if I would need to brace, but just pinching in at 90-degree angles and moving this with just my fingers exactly where I want them to, and getting it exactly the shape that I want it just by massaging it with my thumb and my pointer finger. And there we have his shoulder. So, that being said, this will then meet at his elbow. He will have a section piece off for his hand, but it'll be the same type of rectangle, so mold it into a shape. And then pinch off at the sides, the edges, where you want it to look like a rectangle, and you'll have it exactly the way it should look. Now the hand, obviously, I will be nitpicky, but all you have to do is basically crush it into a smaller square ball. But for the sake of my own interest, I will tear off sections for the thumb and fingers, and then roll them and pinch them the same way that I did with the cylinder. You don't have to do this, but in time you can practice. Notice I didn't tear pieces off, I just tore pieces into it, and used my pointer, middle, and, well, not my thumb finger, but my thumb, to make this work. I put the thumb where it belongs, the fingers where they belong, and if they were ever too long or too short, I just mold them into place, and now they form a fist. All you had to do is just press it into a square image, and I trust that you all know how to do that. If you don't, feel free to ask in the comments. I'll point you to where in the video that was discussed, or walk you through it visually. That, of course, will be his left arm. So then moving on to the right, we'll do the same thing, but just in the opposite direction. We have a piece for the smokestack, rolling it with our three main fingers and making it to look like the kind of shape that we want to. That's a little protruding, so let's flatten the top with our thumb. Mold the shoulder into a ball, flatten and pinch it out into a square. Do so in a way where you can then meet it at the elbow. Mold this into another shape, and notice I'm not going to make a hand this time. That is going to be reserved for his blaster. Make them about the same length, but you can leave that an open piece of foil, an unused piece. We'll form that into a claw in a moment. You can just tear that down the middle. We'll let the muzzle of the gun fit right into here. Now this is for the blaster. Basically be the same thing we did for the smokestack, but in multiple sections. Fortunately, the cartoons version of their Transformers firearms weren't too complicated. So just pinch and roll a small piece that you can use for the handle, another small piece that you can use for the stock and buttress of the gun, and that, of course, doesn't have to be too complicated. It can just be a square that's facing back, as you can see there. Do the same thing to make the whole gun into a cylinder, and if you'd like to add on details, maybe a little pinching in the middle and then another extension into the end, you smooth out the barrel with your thumb to make it a flat surface, and you have Optimus Prime's gun. Doesn't have to be too complicated, but sticking this in will be how you make it mold. You wrap the two excess pieces around over and over again and pinch them into place so that he's holding it. And now we have Optimus Prime holding his gun. This, of course, will be something we can work with when we transform him, but keep these steps in mind and make sure that those smokestacks are actually protruding from the shoulders and are as straight as you can get them. Now for the torso. We've got the lower body, we've got the arms, where does this meet? Right here. As you can see, the extra pieces that we left out almost give us enough to work with, but because we're all beginners here, I want to make sure that you have enough to work with rather than just assuming that you're all experts at this, which you don't have to be to do this. We'll make little adjustments here and there along the way, but this is what it's meant to look like. The torso will be about the same length sheet that we've sectioned off for ourselves thus far, and of course leaving room for the head, we'll attach that separately as well. The torso will be made of two main sections. First and foremost, the grille of the truck, which will form his abdominals, and the windshield, which will form Optimus's pectorals. And what we're going to do is to place each of these pieces on top of the other, flatten them out, but not flat, not crushing them flat, but just make sure that they're on top of each other. And then what we're going to do is fold this over into a piece, just like we did for the tires, and wrap this over. Now, to attach this end, I'm going to pinch in and roll over the two pieces and also wrap it around. And as I'm wrapping this around, I'm also going to make it come down at angles so that way it's going to look like the start of his grill. Then pinching in another detail, we have the first edge of the fan in his grill. And another piece, then another piece. Now, I don't know if you can see that on camera, but all you really have to do is to maintain that square image and pinch the pieces in. Pardon the background noise, everyone. We are in a public space, but we do appreciate the fact that kids are welcome here. Now, for the pectorals, obviously, we have excess room to work with. So what we're going to do is we're going to fold this down again and give it some space in between his grill, and do the same thing we did in pinching that grill. Is we're going to fold two square markings on the inside so that people can see where the windows are and aren't. And all you have to do is to pinch those in and make sure that they're noticeable. It doesn't have to be perfect, but enough so that the message comes across, that you know that this, and isn't this. As long as this stands out as something else, you've accomplished your goal. You can add on details later on, perhaps tearing off a little section as a divider between the two, but all of that is irrelevant so long as it looks like you think it ought to. So the goal is for this to be pleasing to you. You don't have to start performing for others until you think that you've accomplished that level of creativity. This is just to make your own toys before you start making them for others. Adjusting the arms to make sure that they meet where they ought to be in the image that you have in mind for what Optimus needs to look like. We're then going to move on to the head, which is fairly straightforward. We'll use our two main fingers, our pointer and our middle fingers on both ends, to press and pinch in to form his neck. And of course, you can use your thumb as a brace, move it into place as you see fit, but give yourself enough room to work with this material. We're going to pinch off the two antennas that would form his ears. And of course, I don't know if those actually are his ears. Cybertronian anatomy is lost to me, but nonetheless, we'll twist them in just like we did for the smokestacks on the sides and press them into place. Roll over the top of his head so that it looks like a firm piece of his skull, and pinch in on the middle so that you can make sure it matches those kinds of details. We'll work the antennas a little bit more. Pinch in just with your fingernails on the ends an area for his eyes. Now, obviously not both at the same time. That way the space that's left in between will serve as his nose. And we don't have to worry about lips because Optimus Prime has a mouth grill. So we'll just fold that up one more time, pinch on the extra areas that we want it to start and stop on. We'll bring that up to a point, and now we have Optimus Prime's face. Now, this will be the body for the most part, and we can make little adjustments here and there to make sure that it looks right. You can reinforce the edges of his torso to make sure that it looks right to you. But ultimately, as far as the Transformer image is concerned of Optimus Prime, this is all that we need to accomplish. But I promised you an extra step, didn't I? we're going to see how this guy transforms. And since Transformers have that ability in their name, we also want to make sure that this guy can do something cool like that. Now, I remember Transformers Generation 1 and the toys that were released when it came out. So fortunately, this is home court advantage. I remember what the action figure looked like and all the little mechanics that were available and in between. But I'll be walking you through this step by step as well. We want to make sure that we don't forget a small detail that was left out here. And those were, of course, his front wheels. So tear out a wide piece of foil and tear it down the middle, but not all the way, and then outward, but also not all the way, until you have this goalpost looking piece of foil. This will be functioning like a belt. You'll wrap it, move Optimus Prime's arms out like this, and make it connect at the center, wrap, pinch, and mold it around until you have these two side pieces, and then just like we did for the wheels, mold them in to a shape that will resemble a wheel that satisfies you. And once it's satisfying your sensibilities, you can adjust it as you see fit, but using those three techniques: molding, pinching, and pressing. So this will serve as the front end of his wheel. Now, Optimus Prime, as the excellent leader of the Autobots that he is, when he transforms, will basically follow these three basic steps: is folding back the legs. Catch that? Folding back the legs. We have his lower body section that we attached separately, and folding it down so that the two wheels are sticking out and down the sides. Now, you notice why now we did it at that angle. Folding back his head as well, that'll be fairly straightforward, and making sure that other excess pieces don't wiggle away in the process. We now have his lower body being stretched out like a what does that look like? A little L with interesting appendages as well. We'll fold in the feet, which is fairly straightforward. We didn't do too much effort. And mold the lower half of the body together so that now it looks like the back bed of a truck. Moving his arms back, the area with the blaster, that will be for the smokestacks, and you can use those excess areas that you molded around with me the second time as reinforcements as well. Pinch them in, but not too far onto where you roll back his head, and that will give you room to then move his arms and make his blaster into maybe perhaps a form of a canopy. But that's all that you really need to do to make him transform. So we've got the smokestacks coming off the back. We've got the back wheels and the engine grill, and if you want to make it more secure, then you can just wrap a layer around here and there. Make sure that everything stays in place. But we have a transformer here that actually transforms. Generation 1 Optimus Prime, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us for this foil instruction video. If you guys are able to attempt this on your own, have questions along the way, I'd love to see it shared on our Facebook page, TheFoilGuy, on Facebook.com. If you guys know anything else that you'd like to see made step by step, feel free to ask in the comments. But of course, that will conclude today's episode, and I look forward to seeing more of you, more of your participation, and of course, more of your creativity demonstrated as you demonstrate your talents while I continue to do mine. Thank you for your time, and I'll see you guys all again soon.